What is up, YouTube? This is DFS, Dart Throws and Cash. I'm here to discuss Thursday night's football game, and I'm here to discuss the Sunday slate, the 13-game slate. So we did end up cashing in our cash lineup, so that's pretty freaking sweet. That game actually turned out to be a lot better than I thought it would be. The only thing, the kicking was a little off. The wind picked up, I guess, in the beginning of the first half, so there wasn't as much kicking. And I had a thought that the defenses would have been a little bit better, and that would have forced the kickers to kick some more. But they were scoring a lot of touchdowns. I was pretty surprised at how many touchdowns were scored last night. So yeah, it was a good game. I had fun watching it. We won some money, so I mean, there's nothing else we can really ask for. Nick Chubb had a great game. He got 100 rushing yards. Didn't really do much else. Amari Cooper, he had an amazing game. 101 receiving yards, 7 receptions, and a touchdown. Then Deontay Johnson had 8 receptions, 84 receiving yards. And then Mitch Trubisky killed it. He got a rushing touchdown. That's really all we needed from him. And 200 passing yards. No turnovers. Well, there was one turnover at the very end. Deontay Johnson lateraled the ball back, and the Browns ended up jumping on the ball in the end zone, and that screwed up my Millie Maker entry. I was cashing, and up until that point, the Browns defense had not done much, and that was an 8-point play there at the very end. So it knocked me out of my Millie Maker lineup, which is fine. I still broke even, made a profit, so I'm not upset. I'm not upset. The lineup we made did well, so we made some money. Let's go on and talk about the Sunday games. So I made another Word document. This one's pretty extensive. There's a lot of notes here. It's about 5 pages long. So let's get started. Let's just hop in and let's just discuss everything. So like we talked about last week, we want to target these high point total games. So the games that I saw that had the point totals that were pretty high were the Bills, and then we had the Vikings Lions over under 53, then Chiefs Colts 49. That's implied point total for 28 for the Chiefs, which is pretty good. And then we got the Eagles Commanders. The total there is 47. Then Rams Cardinals, we got a 49 over under for the points, and then the Bengals and Jets. I thought I would go ahead and throw that in there because the Bengals are projected to score 25 points total, and that is just enough for me to mention them. So from the beginning, let's start. So we got a lot to talk about. Josh Allen, he is always a viable play. At 8,200, he is still relatively cheap, to be honest, which is kind of interesting. Most of the quarterbacks aren't that expensive, even though they end up scoring you the most points. So I think Allen is very viable still to play in cash. Tournaments, he's still pretty viable. I mean, you're paying up for running backs, right? So Jonathan Taylor is 9,900 just as an example, and he'll maybe give you 25, 30 points, but Josh Allen is consistently giving you about 30, 35 points in the first 2 games already. And the Dolphins just gave up a ton of points to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens last week. So I think Allen could be a very good play in cash. I might not have as much exposure to him just because he's on a short week. So he played on Monday. So it was maybe 5 days prior. So if he's on a short week, that's something to consider. Diggs is still absurdly low price. I think this stack is just too low to pass up. I mean, with the short slate, yeah, that's one thing, but I don't see why Diggs was not put up to about like 9,000. I really don't understand what they're looking at right now with DraftKings. So I'm not complaining. I think that is a great stack to target, just compared to any of the other guys that we're looking at. I mean, Justin Jefferson. Diggs would be a great alternative for Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's up around 9,000, I think, himself. Let me see where I got him at. He is at 9,300. So, I mean, Diggs has just as much breakout potential as Jefferson. So I think he's priced pretty low. So that's somebody I would like to target this week. So then on the other side of the ball, we got the Dolphins, and then that's with Tua Tagovailoa, and he is coming off a 43-point game. Fantasy points, that is. I mean, he threw the ball a bunch. He looked very good. It was kind of surprising that he led that 21-point comeback. He looked great. I mean, he really did. He's cheap. I don't understand why he's this cheap. I mean, I guess I could see it from this perspective that the Bills D are very good. They're not. I mean, they've given up 17 points so far this season. It's not a lot, so I could see why that he would be pretty cheap, because if they're going to be consistently like just annihilating people on defense, I could see why he's that cheap. But I think he's a great target. I got a couple notes here. So yeah, the Bills had a short week. We talked about that already. Stafford threw for 240 yards and a TD in week 1, and the Bills gave up less than 60 rushing yards in that week 1. I mean, if they're going to be scoring points, it's going to be through the air. I think that's pretty much their only weakness right now is through the air. And Tua only needs 18 fantasy points to get that value, that 3 times value that we've been talking about. Well, you got Waddle and Hill as both viable wide receivers. Waddle has been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver in his first 2 games. Well, on average, he's scored the most points. I think he's ranked at the wide receiver 6 right now. And then Hill, a notable thing about Hill is last time he met up with the Bills. Sorry, I typed in Chiefs. That should be Bills. Last time he met up with the Bills, it was 11 receptions and 150 yards for 1 touchdown, and that was when he was on the Chiefs. So it was just a little brain fart there. Anyway, on to Gaziki. He is priced pretty low at 4,300, 14.1 fantasy points week 2. For week 1, he didn't do much. Another notable stat is he was 15% targeted in the red zone. And I did not see Hill actually targeted in the red zone at all. So that's an interesting stat to look at. Gaziki could be that red zone option. Waddle was actually a 30% rate targeted in the red zone. So Waddle actually may be the better option here for touchdown potential, but Hill has that breakout speed where he can just rush past the secondary and just torch people. I mean, he's so fast. And a note down here, this is actually pretty important. It was about an hour ago where I read an article that said Bills rule out the cornerback Dane Jackson, their safety Micah Hyde, and defensive tackle Jordan Phillips. So that's 3 big playmakers on that Bills D that everybody needs to be aware of. I don't think a lot of people really look that deep into it. I'm taking a little bit deeper of a look than most people, I believe. So that is one stat where you could capitalize on picking Hill or Waddle this week. So that's one thing. I would mostly think Hill or Waddle in GPP plays. I mean, because worst case scenario, I mean, the Bills really are just dominant, and they're going to dominate every team, and it just does not end up well for the Dolphins, which I could see that happening. I'm not 100% certain to the point where I'm going to pick Hill and Waddle and put them in my cash, because for one, it's going to be one or the other. I feel like it's going to be Waddle or Hill. Both of them can't go off every week. So I'm a little bit hesitant to put any Dolphins in my lineup just for that reason. But I do think that their potential to be a top 10, top 5 wide receiver this week is there again. They could emulate what they did last week. The Bills D is a little bit different than the Ravens, obviously. But yeah, so that's definitely some stuff to consider for that game. All right, moving on. Vikings Lions. So the Vikings are projected to win the game 29.5 to 23.5 Lions. So this is a pretty high scoring game. I think the Vikings could have a pretty big bounce back week here. I think Kirk Cousins is probably frustrated with himself after last week, and I think that he could potentially have a very good game. His price is pretty low at $6,700, and the Lions have allowed 24.7 fantasy points from Jalen Hurts and 31.8 fantasy points from Carson Wentz. So Cousins definitely in play. I would probably consider him more of a GPP play. And then If you wanted to throw him in a cash game, you could, but I think there's going to be better options because if you just pay up a little bit more, you could get a better quarterback. So Jefferson at 9,300, a little bit expensive, but I think he's kind of viable for that price. I think he's going to have a pretty good game. You got Dalvin Cook, 7,900. He had a pretty unflattering week 2, but I think he's got a comeback week coming as well. Stat here, Lions are the worst rushing D in the NFL currently. So I think Cook could definitely get going, get cooking, and he could really score a lot of fantasy points. One of my favorite targets this week, Irv Smith, is 3,100. So he had a very slow start in game 1. But last week, he had 8 targets in his last game and 14.6 fantasy points. He dropped a walk-in touchdown, essentially. It was a big bomb from Kirk Cousins, and it hit him right in the hands. He was open. I'm not sure if he would have made it all the way to the end zone, but it was going to be a huge play. So he has a lot of potential at that price tag of 3,100. I think he's too cheap for that upside. I'm going to have him have a lot of shares of Irv Smith this week. On the other side of the ball, sorry, we went over the Vikings before the Lions. I think the Lions will have a great week as well. I'm honestly very high on targeting this game. I think that both of their defenses are pretty piss poor and both of their offenses are pretty great. So I think it's going to be a shootout. It's going to be back and forth a lot. So Jared Goff is actually a viable GPP option. Ertz had 333 passing yards last week against the Vikings. I think Jared Goff and St. Brown have a great connection. I think he's going to be able to toss the ball down the field to St. Brown quite a bit. DeAndre Swift, so let's look at him, 7,200. Vikings gave up 111 rushing yards in week 1 against the Packers. And then between A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, they had 8 combined receptions for 73 yards. I don't know what I'm reading. I guess I was reading the 31 fantasy points down here. Anyway, in week 2, Miles Sanders total for 80 yards on 17 attempts. So I think DeAndre Swift could get going. Could be running the ball a lot. I think he's a good target as well. St. Brown, he's great. Last week he scored 40 points for us, so I'm going to continue with that. He's too cheap at 7,200. He's had 12 targets in both of his games so far, extremely high volume, and he's averaging 31 fantasy points. So I'm going to have him in pretty much all of my lineups this week. Moving on, we got the Chiefs and the Colts. So over-under for the point total is 49.5. These lines might have changed a little bit since I got these numbers. I got these numbers maybe 1 or 2 days ago because I've been working on this in my free time. So they might have changed slightly depending on if players got ruled out or just weather conditions, whatever. So Chiefs projected to win 28 to Colts 21, roughly. So Mahomes is viable for GPP. I wouldn't necessarily throw him in cash games. You could if you wanted, but I think there's another better option, and I'm going to go over that pretty soon. So Mahomes, 7,900. He won his last 6 games in a dome, and the Colts have not faced an elite quarterback yet. And those prior quarterbacks, I think that they played Trevor Lawrence, and then I can't remember who they faced the week before, but they got maybe 16, 18 points. And then Mahomes is just a high caliber quarterback. I don't know specifically who's he's going to be throwing the ball to. It's been split between Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, and then McCole Hardman. So it's hard to nail down what wide receiver he's going to be targeting this week, but we know he will be throwing the ball a lot. That's his thing. I think he is going to be a good option. He could be good to play naked, a.k.a. without a tight end or a wide receiver and a GPP lineup, just so you can maximize those points, and it's hard to stack him with one specific player. So you got CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back for the Chiefs. He's the RB1. He's been efficient in both his showings so far, and his floor is relatively low. So he's had some pretty good fantasy games the first 2 games, and he's hasn't had that many touches or targets. So, I think that if he gets utilized more and more, as they might use him a lot more because they're probably going to beat the Colts, I think, in this game, and they're going to be up, so they're going to be wanting to run more. So I think CEH is a very viable option. He's one of the cheaper running back ones on the week, so I think he's going to have a decent game. I don't think he's necessarily going to have a 25, 30-point game, but I think he will break value. So, and that's what I'm looking for. These guys in green are pretty much my cash plays, and then the guys in yellow are kind of my GPP plays. So then we got Kelsey. Kelsey's always a viable option. I've got here, he's target hog, obviously. I mean, he's really the guy who has the most rapport with Mahomes. So he's looked down at a lot if in these like close scenarios like third downs, end zones. He's going to be the guy that Mahomes is looking for because he just knows him the best. So yeah, he's a sneaky option because there's really not that many tight ends that even score a lot. I mean, this year has been real slow for tight ends. There's maybe been 1, 2, 3 tight ends that even have broken 20 points. Maybe not even that in week 2. I know Andrews had a good week last week, and then Kelsey had a good week 1. But pretty much any of the other tight ends have been pretty slow going. So Kelsey could be a difference maker if you pick him and everybody else kind of cheaps out on a different tight end. And he scores 25, 30 fantasy points. Could be a difference maker there if you can find some cheaper options at wide receiver. So that's one thing to consider. I might have a lineup or 2 with him in it, but I'm not super high on him this week. I'm probably going to be focusing on more cash games this week just because I haven't really found that many low value guys that I want to put some money on. So, all right, so Colts to consider. I mean, there's Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman, but I'm going to fade Jonathan Taylor. I mean, just after last week, if he's got the potential to give you a 10-point game, I don't see the point in paying over $9,000 for him. It's just unfortunate, but I just don't. I don't have the salary for it because if you go pay up for a quarterback, I'm not going to be able to fit in an elite running back without throwing in some really weird like random picks that could give us a big donut at the end of the day. So it is what it is. Michael Pittman, if healthy, he could be low owned. So GPP it is for him. I'm not going to be having him in my cash lineups. He's still dealing with injuries, so I don't know how he's going to perform coming out off of that injury. But I think he could be a good play because if he is low owned, it could be the difference maker on your team to put you up in that elite category for tournaments. So moving on, Eagles Commanders, another one of my favorite games. So this game I'll probably just have a couple guys from. To be honest, I think that Jalen Hurts is going to be my quarterback this week. So Goff had 26 fantasy points last week on the Redskins. I think Hurts will outdo that for sure. I mean, he had 2 rushing touchdowns last week. He looked real good. I mean, his floor is just the limit. The sky. This floor is the sky. So, I mean, honestly, he's a great quarterback. He's going to get those rushing opportunities. He's going to throw some. I mean, I don't see why he's this cheap either because he's had a 30-plus fantasy point week already. And like I said earlier, the running backs, the wide receivers that can give you those 30-point weeks are around $9,000, and Jalen Hurts is just too cheap. So he's going to be my cash quarterback, I think, for this week. Then we got Miles Sanders. He's coming off a really good game. As we mentioned earlier, he had 80 rushing yards in the last game. I think that the game script will call for them to run the ball a lot because they probably will be up. I think the Eagles get to an early lead. It'll probably be kind of like that Lions game last week. And then I think that they'll try to run the ball, run the clock down, and then the Commanders will somehow get the garbage time points that they've had before. And yeah, that's pretty much how I see the game going. I honestly don't even think that the Commanders will be able to get much garbage time, just because the showing of the Eagles secondary against the Vikings, it really was impressive. Darius Slay locked Justin Jefferson down. I I think the Eagles D will be very good against this Commanders offense. So then we got A.J. Brown, 7,300. He's looking like a good price. I don't see why he hasn't bumped up in price yet. Last week, yeah, he was a little slow going. I mean, he got like 12 points, I want to say. But I think that he's going to be another good value play this week. I think a Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown stack could be very good. It could pay off a lot. Devonte Smith, surprisingly, last week he did pretty well. He got a lot more targets than he did in week 1, so I think he's a tournament consideration play. I think he'll be relatively low owned too. But the probability of him having a 15, 20-point game is much lower than that of A.J. Brown or somebody else for that price. I'd rather pay up just a little bit more for a better wide receiver. So on the Commander side of the ball, you got Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson. They're both still really cheap price. So, I mean, I don't know how consistently they can keep up their fantasy points. Like I said, I think it's going to be a little bit slower week for the Commanders. I mean, the Eagles secondary really showed us how great they were on that Monday night game. So I think Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson will kind of be more fades for me this week, but I think in a GPP play, if you're looking for a cheaper guy, Dotson or Samuel could be one of the guys that you go for. And then we got Rams Cardinals. So the over-under is 49. Projected score is 26.5 to 23. So that's pretty decent scoring. I think that the Rams to consider are Stafford. So Stafford is 6,500. He's still cheap. I don't know why all of these quarterbacks are cheap, and I'm sorry to give you so many good options at quarterback, but there are just a lot of good options at quarterback. So, yeah, whatever. Take your pick for whichever one of these quarterbacks that you like. I think all of them are viable options. I mean, I just think that the rushing upside for Jalen Hurts or somebody like Josh Allen gives you that higher floor where you couldn't just have a straight-up dud of a week. So Stafford's not going to be rushing for 50 yards. I mean, it's just not going to happen for him. But he could throw for 400 yards. I mean, we've all seen it before. Stafford can toss the ball out there. And I think he's probably going to have a bounce-back week, too, against the Cardinals. I think he's had a couple of tough matchups, and he's going to be full form Stafford, Super Bowl Stafford soon here enough. So some stuff to think about. Derek Carr had 19 fantasy points against the the Cardinals, and then Mahomes had 37.9 fantasy points against the Cardinals. So like I said, for the value, you need 3 times the salary. So if it's 6, you multiply that by 3. So that's 18, right? So you need 18 fantasy points from Stafford roughly to get value in order for you to cash in most standard scoring slates. So yeah, so Stafford is a good look. He only needs 18, 19 fantasy points, and Carr did just that, and then Mahomes blew that out of the water. So I think he'll be between those two numbers. I mean, I think Stafford will probably end up maybe 24, 25 fantasy points. So I think he'll have a good game. Cup, he reached value both weeks. He's still super expensive. I don't like paying up for these like really expensive guys because I would rather buy like 2 guys right at like 6,000 than one guy at nearly 10K and then another guy at 3,000. Like, I think the value of 2 guys at 6,000 who could potentially get you 25, 30 points outweighs the value of somebody who you know is going to get you 30, 5 points or something like that, and a sleeper who could be a complete dud. I'd rather have that consistent points on a weekly basis rather than have one good guy and then have just like a dud. So I don't know if that makes sense for y'all, but it makes sense to me. I would way rather just have 2 moderately good wide receivers than one excellent one and then one kind of unknown type guy. Allen Robinson, he is 5,700. He has rising potential. I called it last game. I said Allen Robinson could be a sneaky play. I figured he was going to get a little bit more active because, I mean, the Rams can't just throw to Kupp every single play, and Robinson's clear number 2. So he looked good. I mean, he had 15-plus points, and then I think there was a play, if I'm not mistaken, where he got targeted in the end zone, and he dropped the ball. Or no, he didn't drop the ball. It was like a penalty, and it had to get called back. And yeah, it sounded very weird. It sounded like a weird play. I wasn't watching that game necessarily, but I did hear about a play where Robinson could have potentially had a lot more points. So moving on to Tyler Higbee. So he is 4,500. Targets are still there, and I think he's still one of the best tight end options. I think he's got a pretty low floor. 4,500 is tough to beat. And like I said, the tight ends aren't there aren't that many tight ends performing very well. Kyle Pitts hasn't done much. I mean, Kittle's been out. Mark Andrews had one dud game. Kelsey just had a dud game. So these guys, you might as well pay down for a tight end that could get you 15, 20 points versus somebody who you know is going to get you around 15, 20 points, because Kelsey was, 7,700, something like that. So you could take that $3,200 extra dollars and disperse it between a couple other guys and really help fortify your lineup there. Cardinals to consider. So Damien Williams, or is it Darrell Williams? I get those two confused all the time. I think it's Darrell. Yeah, I think Darrell from the Chiefs went to Cardinals. Regardless, they're such a similar player to me. But yeah, if James Conner is out, he's a must start essentially. I mean, he got 9 fantasy points and a touchdown. I think it was actually more than 9, if I'm not mistaken. He got a touchdown and a decent amount of points when Conner went down, got injured, his ankle was hurt or something. So I think he's a must start if James Conner is out. I think he's even a sneaky play if James Conner is in, because they'll probably use him a little less with the ankle injury anyway. And then moving on to Marquis Brown. He's $6,000. He is a very high ceiling GPP play. I was high on him a little bit last week too for these tournament entries, and I just think he could potentially have an extremely high scoring game regardless of who they're playing. I think he's still priced pretty low. I think Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown are starting to feel each other out a little bit better. They've had 2 games to now kind of familiarize themselves with each other. So I think Marquise Brown could be another good GPP play. I wouldn't fade him completely this week. And then we got Dortch. So Dortch is still super, super cheap. I mean, he looks good at that $4,300 price tag. Rondelle Moore looks like he's trending not to play. He did not practice Thursday, which was yesterday. And normally if they don't practice Thursday, then there's a red flag thrown up, and then if they don't practice Friday, it's pretty much guaranteed that they're not going to play that Sunday. So you'll have to keep an eye on that today for Rondelle Moore. But I think even if Rondelle Moore does play, I think Kyler Murray likes Dortch. I think he's going to be targeting him. So another cheap play for you guys, Dortch. He could be pretty good. So, all right. Honorable mention for that one is Zach Ertz. He had 11 or so targets last week. I had him down here for my honorable mentions before, and I meant to put him back up, but I just forgot. So Zach Ertz, definitely another good play for a tight end if you're looking for somebody cheaper. Moving on, so we have the Bengals and Jets. So I think that Joe Burrow here could have a bounce back week as well. I mean, I think the Cowboys defense is just a lot better than what we thought they were. So I think that against the Jets that he will succeed a lot better. So they're projected 25 points, and then the Jets are 20. So Joe Mixon, I think he's a good play. He'll catch a lot of passes. He's always a decent running back play. Another note here, Chubb towards the Jets D. I mean, Chubb had, I can't even remember how many points, but he definitely destroyed the Jets D. So I think that Joe Mixon could emulate that and do the same thing. So he looks good to me. I think Jamar Chase is a little too high priced. Higgins is a little too high priced this week. So I think I'm going to be kind of fading a little bit of the Bengals. Other than Burrow, I think Burrow is just going to be able to make it work. He's going to throw the ball. He's kind of like a Patrick Mahomes type deal. I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to specifically, but he's going to get it done. I think both those are good cash plays. Mixon could even be a good GPP play. And then honorable mentions for quarterback, Mac Jones. So I think in my video before when we were talking about the Ravens, we were looking at, I was like reviewing the Monday night games where the Ravens, I can't remember which video it was specifically, but I was talking about how the Ravens secondary is not looking good, and we used to target the Ravens secondary frequently. So I think Mac Jones at 5,100 is pretty damn cheap, and I think that he's pretty viable in any type of format that you want to play him in. I mean, all he needs to do is get you like 15 or so points, and you're good to go. So, I mean, that's like 200 passing yards and then 2 passing touchdowns. And I think he could easily do that against that Ravens secondary that has been pretty pitiful this season. So, Mac Jones looks good to me. Another thing with Mac Jones, so there is just an honorable mention just so I can get that out of the way to stack him. You could go Aguilar this week. He is 4,100. He's coming off a 26 fantasy point game. Jacoby Myers is dealing with some sort of injury this week, and if Myers is out, he could be the number 1 target there. And that would be very, very big at a $4,100 salary. So I think Aguilar is going to be in a lot of my lineups this week. If Myers is out, I'll probably pivot and put more Aguilar in my lineups. So back up to the running backs. Let's talk about Leonard Fournette. So Leonard Fournette is a pretty good running back option. He is a pass catcher. So I think like last week I was high on him too, and he ended up not catching as many passes as I thought he would. But I think in this matchup upcoming, he's going to have a pretty decent fantasy game. Mike Evans is suspended. Then Godwin's banged up. He's not going to play, I believe. I think he had a hamstring issue on top of his already ACL. And then Julio Jones' knee is banged up. Russell Gage's knee is banged up. I mean, their whole team is kind of just banged up. So Fournette has had like 20 attempts, 20 carries in each of his last 2 games. So I think he's going to be a good high-volume play, and I think that he should be utilized in pretty much all of your lineups this week. David Montgomery, kind of a similar story with Montgomery, but not really. I mean, he catches a lot of balls out of the backfield, and then he gets a decent amount of opportunities. I think his price tag has dropped too low based on his performances in week 1 and week 2. Let me look real quick just so I can look a little bit more in depth here. So let's look at, so we had Fournette, and then just to verify the data I just said. So yeah, he's had over 20 attempts in each of the last 2 games, and then he's had just a few targets in each game, but he's had 2 receptions, 9 yards. So it's just a little bit extra padding on top of his already running attempts. Still no touchdowns. I think he's going to get touchdowns eventually. Hopefully it's this week. I could see that happening for sure. So back to what I was saying with David Montgomery. So let's look at him real quick. Like I said, he's too cheap. I mean, 5,900. There's a huge fall off when it comes to running backs. I mean, the price. What I mean is, so look at the points for each running back, right? So we got Jonathan Taylor. His average is 18.9, and his salary is 9,000. Christian McCaffrey, 17.8. His salary is 8,800, and then Derrick Henry's at 8.4. So all these expensive running backs up here have had pretty terrible fantasy outputs Because, I mean, if you grab somebody like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that's why I said he's a good value. I mean, if he gets 19 points versus Derrick Henry's 9, then you are doubling your points and spending way less money. So that's just like my strategy so far. Like somebody like Miles Sanders, I mean, he's at 15 points, and I mean, if you paid down like half as much as Jonathan Taylor for the same amount of points, essentially, then I mean, you're putting yourself in a huge advantage compared to the rest of the people playing the slate. So just something to think about. I'm paying down for running backs this week. If the trends continue, then I will be paying down for running backs for quite some time. I just don't see the value in forking up an extra few $1,000s for a running back that'll get you 5 to 10 more fantasy points, or not even that. So, yeah. Moving on. Let's see. We have Damien Harris. Damien Harris had a pretty good game. Last week he had around, let's say, I think it was 17 fantasy points. He's further down here. I think he had like 16.7. Yep, 16.7. 15 attempts, 71 yards, and then he had a couple targets and a TD. So he was looking good. He did get a little banged up towards the end of the game, so I hope that's not affecting him still. I got him on one of my fantasy teams, actually a couple of my fantasy teams, just because I drafted him pretty late, and I thought he was a decent value for an RB1 on a decent Patriots offense. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's another viable option for sure. Whoops, that's week 2. So let's go back. All right, so we got Cordarrell Patterson. Yet again, he's low priced. I mean, he's got that high ceiling. I mean, week 1, he had like 20 plus fantasy points. So I think he's worth a shot in GPP, but his floor last week was pretty damn low. So I probably won't be grabbing him in any cash lineups. Devonte Adams, honorable mentions for wide receivers. I mean, he speaks for himself. We've talked about him a lot on this podcast. I mean, he's always getting a ton of targets. Mike Williams, he really showed how good of a receiver he was last week. I feel like his price tag is a little too low. Keep an eye on Keenan Allen. If Keenan Allen is not in, I think you should probably put Williams in like all of your lineups essentially. Yeah, you remain limited at practice Thursday, so we'll see. Keep an eye on Keenan Allen. If Mike Williams plays, he is way underpriced. I mean, he had a bunch of targets. He looked very good. He was running good routes. He was jumping over people, catching the ball. He looked great in that last game against the Chiefs. Yeah, 28 points. So looked good. I think his ceiling is very high. GPP for sure. Cash maybe if Keenan Allen is out. So Brandon Cooks, I'm on the Brandon Cooks train again. I love Brandon Cooks. I don't know. I mean, it's just the volume is always there. I've made this claim probably every single week so far. I mean, if you get passes your way, you're gonna eventually do something with it. And I think he's a talented guy. I mean, he's got 12 targets, 10 targets. Yeah, he's not catching most of them. Well, he got most of them for week 1, but he's not turning it into that much fantasy points. But just that opportunity in general, most players do not have that, especially at a $5,800 salary. I mean, it's just he's too cheap to pass up. I maybe don't play him in cash this week, but I think he's definitely like a pretty good price. I mean, because if you look at the guys around him, I mean, look at Adam Thielen. He had 7 targets, 4 targets. Bateman, he's had some good games, but his targets aren't there. 7, 5. Robinson, 5, 2. I mean, eventually he's going to break out. You guys get what I'm saying. He's got the opportunity, you know what I mean? So he could put up a 30 fantasy point week 1 week, and then it'll be like, well, why was he $5,800? So I'm going to catch him one of those weeks, and I'm going to make a lot of money. So that's just how it's going to be. Yeah, and then the other 2 guys, it's actually funny. These guys are the exact same price. Drake London, he is looking good. He's the number 1 receiving option in the Falcons, on the Falcons team and the Falcons receiving core. So he is a viable option for sure in GPP. I am not 100% confident in Drake London that much. Throw him in my cash lineup just yet. I mean, yeah, 12 fantasy points in his first game, 24 in his second. So yeah, his targets got up there. I think that if we get 1 or 2 more games of these, I will start to throw him in my cash lineups if his price stays the same. So yeah, he's definitely undervalued for what he can perform. So yeah, in tournaments, target that guy for sure. He's too cheap to pass up in tournaments. Garrett Wilson, kind of the same deal. These are both rookies that we're talking about. So Garrett Wilson is looking great. Last game, he had a bunch of fantasy points. Let's take a look so I can get exact numbers so I'm not just spewing crap. 14 targets, 8 receptions, 102 yards. I mean, that's a lot. two touchdowns. That's a lot. He did pretty well against the Browns D. Browns D is pretty good. So he's still a little bit underpriced for his ceiling. Oh, I lied about the price too. He's $5,400. He's even cheaper. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely viable for tournaments, maybe even cash if you're a little bit riskier. But I don't think I'm gonna put him in my cash lineup. And then we got Chris Olave. He had the most air yards, I think, last week. Sorry, the most air yard targets, if I'm quoting somebody correctly there. So, yeah, I mean, let's take a look at him real quick, just so I can give you a quick rundown of the exact stats. So, 13 targets last week, 5 receptions. Like I said, I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse, but the opportunity's there. I think 13 targets, he could really do a lot. And I mean, the Carolina D, I've got a bunch of Carolina stuff behind me, but they're not playing too good. So, I mean, it might be a team to target. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we just lost to the Browns and the Giants. So, it's like, okay. Anyway, yeah, the Saints, I think Olave is going to be a good pick. I really do. I think that the further he goes in his career, he's going to be great. I think all 3 of those guys are going to be excellent. Drake London, Olave, Garrett Wilson. I mean, even George Pickens, all of those guys, this rookie class, I think they're going to be special. I really do. I'm seeing a lot of really good things out of those guys. So, yeah, Jacoby Meyer's in play. If he's playing, I got a bunch of question marks because it's like, is he playing? I don't know. Yeah, keep an eye on that. Aguilar, already talked about him. Duvernay, he's dealing with concussion. I don't understand how these players can get concussions and then come back to play within a week or so. To me, that just doesn't seem very feasible. But, I mean, hey, if a concussion wasn't that bad, then, yeah, he could come back and really do well. I mean, in every single fantasy game he's done very well. Sorry, I keep pulling up that wrong one. Let's look at him real quick. Duvernay. I mean, it's just too cheap, $4,000, and if he's averaging 16 fantasy points, it's just too cheap. Like, his floor at 12 points is value at 4,000. So, yeah, I think he could be a good pick for a dart throw. All right, and then we got Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother, Equanimous St. Brown. So it seems Justin Fields, I was watching the Bears play the other day, seems Justin Fields tends to favor Equanimous St. Brown. He seems like he's the wide receiver one on the Bears. I don't know why I'm laughing. I guess it's just funny because they are so unsuccessful. It's just ridiculous. Like, it's just laughable. I mean, I guess that's a good term for it. So, I mean, just look at Justin Fields. He almost ran one in. I don't think he's, like, completely, like, I don't know, inept. But just look at this. I mean, 17 attempts, 11 attempts for passing, 8 completions, 7 completions. What are they doing on the offensive side of the ball? Like, it's like, it must be like 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Like 11 passes, dude. Like, what the fuck is happening? Excuse my language. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, if Equanimeous St. Brown, if he decides to pass a little bit more, if they get something good going on offense, I think with David Montgomery, they might this week just because they're up against the Texans D. That's not so good. But yeah, I mean, he's got okay fantasy numbers. I mean, like almost 9 points, 6 points. He had 4 targets. So yeah, he's getting targeted a little bit more. I think once they get the rushing game going, they're going to be passing. And I truly think Equanimeous St. Brown is the wide receiver 1. And I'm laughing, but I'm serious. Like, I do think he will eventually, like, turn into something. If he has half of his brother's talent, then yeah, he should be decent. So if you're in a tournament and you need somebody just, like, super cheap and, like, he could hit, like, I mean, honestly, like, he could catch a pass that's, like, 80 yards for a touchdown, and that would be it. That's all you need. So, yeah, definitely put him into consideration. I'm not playing him in cash. Let's see, who else do I have here? Andy Isabella. So Andy Isabella is back, and he's very cheap. Andy Isabella is this tiny little guy, if you don't know who he is, for the Cardinals, and he's a decent wide receiver, man. I think Kyler Murray's got a thing for the other little guys on his team. See, like, I mean, he targets, like, what's up with the Cardinals and the little guys? I mean, you got Rondelle Moore, Andy Isabella, like, they're all, like, little midgets running around on the football field. Anyway, I'm getting so distracted now. But, yeah, anyway, Andy Isabella, I think he's a good sneaky play. I mean, because nobody else is going to be on him, you know what I mean? Like, if Rondelle Moore is still out, which he just got ruled out. Yeah, that just happened, like, 40 minutes ago. So, yeah, Rondelle Moore's out. Dortch is in. And then Andy Isabella, if you want to get a little crazy, if you want to pick one of the little guys. Last year he was pretty decent, like, to be honest. Like, he had some breakout plays. I think they used him as, like, a punt return guy, too. He's kind of a beast. Like, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I like him. But tournaments only for him. And that's just if you really want to get different. All right, defense. So, Buccaneers. I think that the Buccaneers are the best defensive play this week. I mean, in week 1 they had 13 points. Week 2 they had 26 points. Like, it's wild. I mean, I really think that they're going to be a good fantasy choice this week. I can't remember exactly who they're going up against. Let's look that up real quick just so I can justify. Yeah, the Packers. Okay. So Aaron Rodgers hasn't really gotten much going, like, at all, to be honest, with his team. I mean, he's got a bunch of young guys that he's throwing to. I mean, Alan Lazard just came back last week, but, I mean, he really hasn't gotten much going. 230 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, I could see that the Bucs, like, if they can stop the Saints offense, who they play week 1? Let's look real quick. Sorry, I have to keep looking stuff up. I don't know everything off the top of my head. I got a good bit. Yeah, they stopped Dak Prescott, the Cowboys, week 1, and they got 13 fantasy points off of them. So, yeah, I mean, I think Bucs are in play for sure. I like them. I'm putting them in my cash lineup. I'm going to finish building this lineup when I'm done, like, jabbering away. Yeah, so we got Texans D. I think that they're going to be a pretty decent play this week as well. I think they're playing the Bears, if I've got that right, because I just talked about that. And then the Seahawks are going to be another decent fantasy start for defense as well. There's a cheaper option for you. So, yeah, they're playing the Falcons. I think either the Falcons or the Seahawks are actually a pretty decent start this week just because both of their offenses kind of suck. So, yeah, there's a couple good defenses that I like. I mean, Chargers are going to be good too. I think that the Chargers could shut down the Jags, but I want that $800 extra that I can save with the Bucs. So, all right. So moving on. As I said earlier, I am going for Jalen Hurts here. I think he's a great play, and then Irv Smith, too cheap to pass up. I mean, all he needs is 9 fantasy points to break value. So we're in a good spot there. Let's see. Honestly, with Fournette, I would rather grab Miles Sanders here. Actually, I don't want to do that because Jalen Hurts. I don't like sacking a running back and a quarterback on the same team. Well, I guess that would be mostly in like GPPs. You could get it done. Let's see. I think there's going to be better options here. The crazy thing is, like, I think Josh Jacobs could have a great week as well. I mean, and he's priced very low. Honestly, I'm going to throw Josh Jacobs in here. I think it's too low. Didn't practice Thursday due to illness. Nah. Nah. Alright, I gotta move on. I gotta pick somebody. Alright, Joe Mixon. That's who we're gonna go with. That works. He's not too expensive to the point where I can't fit other guys in, and he's not too cheap to the point where, like, I don't think he's gonna perform very well. Justification, Nick Chubb just destroyed the Jets. I mean, that's all I need. I mean, Joe Mixon's great. Like, I really just think he's, like, going to be awesome. 27 carries, 19 carries, 9 targets, 4 targets. He's gonna do well. All right. Amon-Ra St. Brown, my favorite guy right now. Got to go with him. And then I'm going to have to fit some cheaper guys in here. Let's go down. Let's go down. Aguilar. And then Dortch. Maybe. Might have to go even cheaper. I'm honestly considering doing a double tight end, like one tight end and a flex. Honestly, I think this is a good lineup so far for sure. But I'm just not in love with Pittman this week. Waddle, he's just, I don't know. Week 1, he didn't do that great, right? Like, he did all right. 19 targets. I just feel like we could modify this a little bit and get a little more. You know what? Yeah, the thing is, like, I guess it's kind of hard this week because, even with a cheap tight end, 2 cheap wide receiver options, you really have to pay up. So, you know what? I'm gonna change my defense. So I'm gonna use one of the other defenses, and y'all can follow suit. I did cash like 2 out of the last 3 videos. So if y'all want to do what I'm doing, then go ahead. Yeah, screw it. Let's go Texans for the defense. Then let's see what that opens up for us in that flex spot. All right. I like Tyreek Hill a lot better. There we go. That's a beautiful lineup. I think so. As long as Myers is out, I think this is a good lineup. We've got exposure to a lot of different games. I think that St. Brown will be great. I think Mixon will be great. I think all of these players will be great. The only people that are iffy is Irv Smith, Dortch, and Aguilar, but they're not really even that iffy because, they've performed already. Yeah, the only guy I'd be like somewhat worried about would be Aguilar. So if Myers is in, maybe reconsider adjusting a little bit. Let me look at a different pivot real quick. If you guys have a little bit of extra time, like if, let's just say, he's out, right? I'll show you guys a different pivot, like of what I would do. If Myers is in. So let's go. Boom. Hurts. Boom. Mixon. And we had Montgomery. And then we got Dortch. Then we got Monroe. Then we got Smith. And then we got, let's go with Texans again. All right, here's something that I would do. So we got a remaining salary of $5,800 and $5,900 each. So, well, yeah. So we could do $5,800 and $5,900. So we could go. Cooks. And then, honestly, I would go Michael Thomas, I think. He has surprisingly been great. But yeah, that would be my alternate. I think those are both great lineups. You see what I'm talking about, though, when it kind of, like, pans out where, say Aguilar. Say we had Aguilar, right? And then we did the Tyreek Hill as well. So, I mean, say Tyreek Hill doesn't have, like, an astounding game. Like, say he has, like, a 20-point game, right? And then say Aguilar has a 5-point game. So you got 25 points combined between the two of them. I mean, this is just, like, all hypothetical, obviously. But I'm just saying, it can happen. Like, Hill isn't going to have, like, 30 points every game. It's just, like, not humanly possible. Like, see, he had 18. And then look at week 1 with the floors. So you got, like, 4.8 fantasy points there. So, I mean, it's very feasible that they could get you 25 points total. So when you have two guys like Cooks and Michael Thomas, on average, he's around, like, 20 points, right? Like, worst case scenario, I mean, so far, it's like 18. I'm sure he could do worse, but you know what I'm saying? Like, the 2 data points that we have already are pretty high. And then Cooks, 15 and 9.4. So I think, like, 9.4 is, like, the lowest of the low of Cooks' outcome. I just really think he's going to, especially against the Bears, I think he's going to have a much better game. So, I mean, like, okay, let's say 10 points here and then 18 points for Michael Thomas. It's not that big of a difference, like the 23 points between Hill, but that's like a 5-point difference, and I think that's considerable. So, I mean, I do like having these, like, kind of more moderate and wide receivers in my lineups. But that's only if Aguilar was, like, that's only if Myers was in, because I would keep Aguilar in the lineup because I think he's going to have more fantasy production with Myers out. So yeah, I think with Aguilar, that Aguilar lineup is the better one for now. But if Myers is in, then definitely pivot to this one, and I like this one just as much as the other one. So honestly, you could pick either one. I'm gonna enter this one in just to see how it does as well, so I can, like, report back to you guys and show you which lineup did better and whatnot. So yeah, that is the video for today. I have been going at it for an hour. So if you sat through the whole video, then props to you. I spent a lot of time and effort kind of breaking down all this information, analyzing it, and I'm still getting used to talking to the camera and like, just, I don't know, going over data in general, trying to convey it to you guys in a way that makes sense. And I know I probably ramble and get a little jumbled up every now and again, but yeah, I'm appreciative of you guys sticking around, and I think my podcasts will get better and better as I continue to make them. So yeah, I mean, thank you so much for watching. I will report back to you guys on maybe Monday. I think that'll be the best one, and then I'll give you another lineup for the Monday game slate. So thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment, subscribe, like the video, maybe share it with a friend who likes fantasy football as well. Thank you so much. Goodbye.